My name is Jason and this is Just Watches. Alright, today we are going to compare the Seiko Sarb033 to the Seiko SZSB013. Now, the SZSB has a very similar design language to the Sarb from a distance, and when they were first released I thought that the SZSB might be a replacement for the Sarb. However, upon closer inspection, I no longer think this is the case. Although the SZSB has its merits, if you can find it at the right price, it doesn't replace the Sarb. Now, this video will only serve as a comparison. If you want a review of either of these watches, they are available on my channel. However, before we get into the comparison, if you're enjoying the content of this channel, I invite you to subscribe, and if you're enjoying the content of this individual video, please give it a thumbs up. Okay, so one very important thing here for the comparison is going to be the price. Now, I believe the Sarb033's MSRP was about $400 when it was released in 2008. I did purchase mine for $350 before they were discontinued. The SZSB's MSRP is $550, but they can be found on sale as cheap as $200. Now, for the cases, the Sarb is smaller. It's 38mm in diameter by 45mm lug to lug, 11.5mm thick, and then has a 20mm lug with opening. The SZSB, on the other hand, is 40mm in diameter with a 48mm lug to lug and is a bit thicker with 13mm thickness and then a 20mm lug with opening. Now, the Sarb case overall is smaller and has better and more interesting finishing. The Sarb has a layered case where the top layer is brushed and the rest of the case is high polish. It is unique and interesting. The SZSB case is more straightforward with a brushed top and high polished sides. The SZSB also has crown guards, which I'm not really a fan of. They both feature high polished bezels and both have lugs that curve down, although the curve on the Sarb is slightly more pronounced. And then the lugs on the SZSB are pierced for easier strap changes. I prefer the Sarb case both for its smaller size, which is a personal preference, but also for its unique stepped finishing. Now, the bracelets are both okay, but I have complaints about both. Starting with the Sarb bracelet, there is a gap between the solid end link and the first link. The finishing is good, however, and the links are brushed on the top with a high polished bevel that extends to the sides. This is very cohesive with the step design of the case. The bracelet also tapers down to 18mm, back up to around 19mm at the double push to plant clasp. The scissor is nicely milled, but the clasp has a very large gap when closed. The SZSB bracelet only has hollow end links, and while there is no gap, the end link is quite a bit shorter than the lugs, which looks kind of funny. The link finishing is simpler than on the Sarb, but the taper is more pronounced to 16mm. The double push to point clasp also has a nicely milled scissor. Both bracelets sacrifice micro precisions for a small clasp, and both use the pin and collar system for sizing, although the SZSB collars are much larger and therefore easier to size. Bracelets have never really been Seiko's strong suit, but I do appreciate a watch that comes on a bracelet. Both watches have 6mm push-pull crowns, but the crown on the Sarb is much better finished with a deeply engraved S, which signs the crown. Again, I'm also not a fan of the crown guards on the SZSB. The Sarb has a flat sapphire crystal, which is nice, but I really wish it had an AR coating, which would greatly improve the watch overall. The SZSB has a domed hardlex crystal, which suffers even more from the lack of AR as the crystal catches more light, and that ends up obscuring the dial. There's also the fact that hardlex is just going to be easier to scratch, and when you have a domed crystal that's proud of the bezel of the watch, you are also more likely to catch it on something. The Sarb has the 6-ARB15 movement, which has a longer power reserve and a slightly tighter stated accuracy than the 4R35 that resides in the SZSB. However, in my experience, both of these movements run about plus or minus 10 seconds a day on average. Now, the dial hands and indices are where these watches are closer than I thought they would be. As I said in my review of the SZSB, I was surprised by the quality of these elements. I would say the SZSB is actually on par with the Sarb here, and additionally, the SZSB comes in this blue dial option, which as far as I know was never available on a Sarb. Of course, the SZSB has no loom while the Sarb does. In my opinion, this pushes the Sarb into a more versatile position, but this will come down to personal preference. So overall, the Sarb is a more refined watch. Details like the cohesive bracelet design, the sewing needle second hand, and the nicely sound crown just put the Sarb ahead of the SZSB. The main problem with the SZSB is that it feels like it was made with parts that were just available to Seiko, rather than actually designed specifically for the watch. As far as cost, there is something to note here that I don't often hear mentioned. The Sarb was and still is an amazing value at its MSRP, but it was initially released in 2008, so comparing it to the prices of watches that come out now is a bit of an apples to orange comparison. That being said, Seiko has been increasing their prices, and I don't think it is solely a result of inflation over time. They are moving up market. However, the SZSB is regularly on sale for around $200, and at that price I do think it is worth it. Is it a replacement for the Sarb? Definitely not, but I believe the Sarb is a reminder of a Seiko that no longer exists. It is the ghost of Seiko's past. So what do you think about these two watches? Let me know in the comments below. As always, if you're enjoying the contents of this channel, I invite you to subscribe, and if you like the contents of this individual video, please give it a thumbs up. That's all for this time. My name is Jason, and you have been watching Just Watches.